Joining us down the line, Dr. Peter Morici from the University of Maryland. He's an economist. He understands this stuff. Dr. Morici, here's my question. If you change the overtime rules so that if you work, every employee who works overtime would be paid overtime, how does that impact business?
Well, that's not what he's proposing. He's proposing to raise the cap. Right now, if you make $455 a week as a salary, not on an hourly basis,
right,
or less, and you work more than 40 hours, you're entitled to overtime. That was last changed 10 years ago. If we adjust it for inflation, I doubt that it would have very much of a consequence.
If it goes beyond that?
It's just like the minimum wage. It would have a considerable consequence. The Economic Policy Institute, which is basically a labor pawn, wants it raised up to near about $50,000 a year. Heck, how do you deal with entry-level school teachers that have to stay after school to do lesson plans? Are they going to get, and how are we going to clock that? It basically would put the federal government in the position of, regulating half of the labor market, which is exactly what he wants. Basically, he's looked at the German system. He says, the one thing wrong with national wage setting is that the unions do it when it's the government that should be doing it.
Wow.
That's Obama, you know that.
Yeah, well, he is sort of running as a labor organizer in chief here with
more like running
things.
Socialist in chief. And I don't mean that from the point of view of redistribution, because people always think about it in those terms. I'm talking about in just managing the economy in every conceivable way. I guess he's decided he wants to slow growth to zero. Then we won't have any more global warming.
But Peter Morici, you say that this isn't going to have a huge economic impact.
Well, it depends on how much he raises it.
I understand.
Even Bush raised it.
But I was that guy. I was in my early 20s, and I was on a salary, but I wanted to show my employer that I was a go-getter. I was an up-and-comer. I was a guy on the rise. I was a hungry...
And you weren't afraid of work.
No, so I put in the extra hours to prove that and to show that, and I was rewarded. I got promoted. I got up the food chain faster than the other people who were there on salary because I showed initiative. What does this say to the employer's going to keep me from doing that, aren't they?
I don't know. I mean, we're talking about right now the cap is very, very low, and there's also a difference between being assigned work that you stay later for and staying later in your office to improve yourself, the equivalent to studying. I did a lot of what you're talking about, but I mean, where do you draw the line between work and someone essentially, self-studying and things of that nature? I know I'm stretching your concept a bit, but I think this gets into the whole issue of how difficult it is to enforce this kind of thing.
Now, let's say hypothetically you did a morning show every day on a radio station and then had to come back later in the day and do an afternoon show.
At like 5 o'clock.
Yeah, just hypothetically speaking.
Well, given what you guys paid me to do shows, I probably would have followed.
Right. Moving on.
It's very nice having you, Peter, for the last time here this morning. Hey,
actually, they stopped calling me when I started saying, gee, could I have $1.25 an hour? No, that would be a split day, so you'd clock the two sets of hours separately. You wouldn't clock what's in between.
All right. I'm just asking for a friend.
All right. Yeah, we're just curious.
Yeah, well, listen, we have a little bit left over from last night's dinner. Stop by for lunch.
All right. So listen, I got a question for you about the situation in the Ukraine, where the Russians are massing troops and where we have sort of thrown down the gauntlet. You actually have an idea about how we might curb Russian aggression.
Well, you have to remember that 50% of Moscow's government revenue comes from oil and natural gas exports. If the Europeans would find alternatives, which they can do over the next couple of years, to importing natural gas, they'd basically starve the Russian machine. But I don't think that kind of threat or any of the economic saber-rattling that Merkel did yesterday is going to do much good, because in parallel to that, the Ukraine asked for military assistance. And we are obligated under a 1994 agreement to help defend their security, not necessarily our troops, but we've signed a co-security agreement with them, the NATO, the Europeans, and Russia. And Mr. Obama is limiting it to sending over rations. He doesn't want to upset Mr. Putin. I mean, it's really clear that Mr. Putin is playing war in the woods like kids do with tanks and guns, and Mr. Obama is serving tea and curtsying.
Yeah. Peter Morici is our guest. By the way, follow him on, it's P. Morici1, right? Is that it on Twitter?
That's it, P. Morici1.
P. Morici1. And
liberals are welcome.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this, if I can circle back to this overtime thing just for a second, because I'm trying to...
with that, aren't you? You really want to get your money.
No. I'm focusing back on the administration and the Democrats. I mean, I'm looking at... We have a huge employment issue here with so many people leaving the workforce. It's down to 1978 levels in terms of how few people are actually engaged in the workforce right now. And in the last 6 months, here are the ideas that I can see from Obama. Raise the minimum wage, extend unemployment benefit for people who are out of work, and now change the way overtime is calculated based on the minimum salary that you get per week. Is it fair to say that they've run out of ideas to actually get people working?
Yeah. He's blind to facts and deaf to reason. He also believes in all this stuff. He learned his economics at a food co-op in Chicago or something. I mean,
but none of these ideas get people to work. It's only accommodating the people who are...
They will cost jobs, and he's denying that. And he's looking silly because the Congressional Budget Office said $10.10 an hour. It costs 500,000 jobs. And the White House economists dismissed that. They basically hoard themselves. They really did. They asked Janet Yellen on the Hill when she testified. A congressman asked her, well, who do you believe, the White House economists or the CBO? And she pretty much said the CBO. So guess what, Mr. Furman? The chairman of the Federal Reserve, put there by the president, says that your economics is hokum. Now, either we take the degree off the wall, or what the heck's going on here? I mean, those guys are just absolutely... The Council of Economic Advisors really ought to have a red light in the window.
Yeah. No, all right. Well, listen, at least there would be employment involved there, Peter Morici. At least somebody would have a job, even if it required a tawdry red light district in Washington.
Well, yeah, and it's called the black market economy, the gray economy, whatever. I don't know much about that, having grown up in New York City, But really, all these things are jobs killers. And this is the worst time for the kinds of proposals he's considering. But what it does is it permits him to distract attention. Most people don't understand what 10.10 an hour means. It's a 40% increase. You can't increase the price of anything by 40% without costing, without losing demand, namely costing jobs in this case. But, they don't do that kind of analysis. This gives them talking points. And let's face it, Mr. Obama became president of the United States so he could go to gymnasiums in Iowa and talk to carefully screened students and bellow his lungs. He really ought to be a talk show host.
Well, I think that's where he's headed after he leaves.
Wait a minute. We got enough talk show hosts out there. We don't need anyone else jumping into that industry.
Well, you guys aren't talk show hosts. You guys are morning drive guys. So I'm not going after your jobs. I realize, that we don't want to drive the rate that you guys are getting down much below $1 an hour.
Oh, stop it.
Thank you, Peter Morici,
wow.
for joining.
It's so been nice having you here for the last time. Peter Morici, University of Maryland.
Really hit close to home there.
It's 6:50.
You see what college professors get.